Russ not gonna be here today?
No. He's in Kentucky or wherever.
Oh, Mississippi.
Mississippi, okay.
Yeah, good Lord, that can't be fun right now.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
95% humidity with a chance of tornadoes.
Is it? Okay. If I can call the CCWD regular board meeting to order Wednesday, May 29th at 1 o'clock. Okay, if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rebecca, if you'll call the roll.
Director Cicada.
Here.
Director Davidson.
Here?
Director Rado.
Here.
Director Rivera.
Here. And President Thomas is absent. Item number 2, we have public comment, and I see a lot of employees and no public. Okay, so let's go on to item number 3, the consent agenda. 3A, the approval of minutes for the board meeting of April 24th. 3B, approval to amend Appendix A of District Policy 5070, Conflict of Interest Code.
I'll move for acceptance.
I'll second. Okay. Call.
Director Cicada.
Yes.
Director Davidson.
Yes.
Director Rado.
Yes.
Director Hunter.
Yes. Okay, moving along to new business. 4A, discussion action regarding approval of the written verification of water supply for the vesting tentative subdivision map for Saddle Creek development within the Copper Code Service area. Mr. Peter Martin.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, board members. Today, we have an item here for your consideration of adoption. It's a written verification of water supply that was requested pursuant to water code requirements by the county as part of their approval process for the vesting tentative subdivision map for Saddle Creek. As you can see, there's actually been a reduction in the total number of residential units that they're proposing. They're actually reducing it down to 753 total lots, and one of those lots is going to be a 48 unit condominium development on 6-acre parcel. So one of the interesting things is when it was originally proposed, there wasn't a requirement for a water supply assessment, so we went through the process of doing that as part of their action to approve this new subdivision map. And so it's a little different. It's called a written verification of water supply, which is required as a result of changes to the subdivision maps. And so I went to work and prepared this in the 90-day window that was required by the county for their action, and it's been reviewed by our council and is ready for your approval, and I'll take any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
I remember when this law came out, we were concerned that it was going to be basically turn into a privately owned water right. What's to prevent that now? Is the law different than that? I mean, is there an expiration on this if they don't develop? And
yeah, it's funny because we have those master facilities agreements and things like that we've obviously already executed with Saddle Creek over the years, and a lot of those very clearly state that there's no conveyance of a water right or anything like that. Essentially in this document too, it says pretty clearly that there's no dedication of a water supply to them if they don't finish it. It's mostly just saying when you do these, for instance, the law requires that you project out, do you have enough water supply to serve them for the next 20 years? Have you had any issues over the last 20 years? and those kinds of things. So those are what they're looking for. And there's some very specific questions in the water code that you have to respond to in these assessments. And it's, kind of boring, I mean, to be honest, but, you just kind of have to kind of check the box as part of this. And yeah, it's really not dedicating anything as far as water rights per se, but it's really just a historical and projecting out an outlook.
Just
for that
where the
sort of
water's
thing.
coming from. And
Exactly.
Peter, this is a requirement of who said that we had to do this?
So this is a requirement in the water code. It was passed under a piece of legislation called SB 610, and I believe it's 221, which require that subdivision get a written verification of water supply or a water supply assessment. We were able to charge a fee to the developer to compensate us for the staff time associated with developing this. And so but it is required within a 90-day window that you do respond. You can get an extension and things like that too. There's some other things in the water code as well, so.
Any other questions?
I'll move for acceptance.
I'll second.
Okay. I do have one question. We have dropped it down, or according to the write-up, you dropped it down to 753 lots in, dropping it down from 1650. What happens if growth comes and they're back up again? Will we come back and?
Yeah, I believe they would have to resubmit an entire set of documents again to the county to get approvals to develop those lots again. So this is really an approval for this particular map, subdivision map that they're proposing.
Isn't there a threshold? I want to say it's 500 units.
That's correct.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
So if they wanted an additional 400 units, they probably wouldn't have to do this document if they did, if it changed the makeup of this development, but if it's on another piece of property that is adjacent to this, then I don't think they have to get this report.
Yeah, I think it's much less stringent as far as the requirements to get the approvals and things like that, especially with regard, there's a whole slew of approvals they got to get, and a lot of them are tied into things like CEQA and stuff like that. They're actually utilizing the prior EIR to go through this process, so they're not reissuing a new CEQA document and things like that, so.
Hey, Peter, I see there's an assessment of $2,500 on this, and who is it assessed to, and how is that paid? How is that, does it come directly to us, reimbursement
Yes.
and that's for the cost of putting this together?
Right, so we just sent an invoice to Tom Hicks over at, what is it, I guess it's CV, Saddle Creek Partners now, and they've already paid it actually, so.
And
Okay.
just on that point, so the developer really cooperative in this process, didn't hesitate to pay that deposit, because anything like this, typically we're going to collect a deposit to cover staff time and legal costs. We don't have a fee in our policy for this type of work, so it's part of what will get rolled into our fee update is we'll create a new one. But just by letter agreement, they agreed in this case. So we'll do it on a case-by-case basis at this point. Our goal would be to spend less than that and give them a refund. But we'll make sure that they're covering the cost of whatever expense that we have.
So if further changes do have to be made to it, we're confident they're going to pay over and above this as well.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that's clearly, developer's obligation to cover the cost of.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the first one we've done in about 10 years, so it's probably good that we take a look at this again.
Good to
or
practice that for the-
establishing fees.
For the coming future. huh?
And so you looked at your time. that you
Right, so I
invested.
track time and projected that out along with Downey Brand's time as well, so.
Okay. Well, there is no public. We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please.
Director Sigmund?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Director Anderson?
Yes. Thank you, Peter.
You bet.
4B, discussion direction on the Calaveras County Dig Once policy. Michael Minkler.
Yeah, so I sent to the board our comment letters. Well, let me back up with background. Calvert County Public Works has been talking about a proposed dig once policy for quite some time. But this is the first time that we've actually seen a draft policy. It was circulated, I believe it was April 29th, about a month ago. And it does a lot more than just a dig once part of the policy. That's actually only one provision, and the rest of the draft proposal is updates to their trench cut and pavement resurfacing specifications, the standards that they've adopted in their permit requirements. So we Damon and our engineering department and several other folks took a very close look at this, found some areas that we're pretty concerned about in terms of the increase in work effort that it would take on our part, and without really, I think we just don't see that there's really a commensurate benefit to the conditions of the roads. We obviously do a lot of work in county roads, so we need to take responsibility for that work and for the repair work that we do, which we do currently take very seriously. We have our own specifications that we've adopted that in many cases are more stringent than the county's current specs or their proposed specs even. So it's not an issue that we're unfamiliar with. So the discussion about a dig once policy really has been focused on coordinating efforts between the utilities and the county, so that if the county is going to come out and pave new sections of road, that the utilities have, if they're planning on doing any infrastructure work in those sections of road, that we're doing it in advance of the road being resurfaced, so that we're not trenching in a newly paved road. And so really, that aspect of it is geared towards improved coordination between the county and the utilities. And that's something that we've already tried to improve that relationship with the Public Works Department. We don't want to trench in brand new roads either. So we've asked for a schedule of paving projects that the county is going to pursue, so that we can, to the extent that we can, coordinate our infrastructure work ahead of those paving projects. It may not always be possible, but in cases where it lines up, then we want to make that effort. There's one provision in this policy that is basically a prohibition against trenching in any county road that was repaved within the last 5 years, or if it has a pavement index of 80 or above, I believe. So that's really the one provision in the whole proposed policy that actually speaks to that issue of
Just
time.
I heard you guys talk about it. I watched the podcast that was sent the other day. I mean, the big issue is we don't want to have to bore everything, right?
That's one of the big concerns. Boring requirements, backfill material is another big concern. The level of inspection and coordination with the Public Works Department is another big concern. We currently do a lot of work that it would just be completely impractical to have county inspectors coming out and looking at.
Oh, particularly because they're, right now, for me to get an inspection, it takes 48 hours.
It would
So we
not-
could have trenches open for all weekend long, and that's something, we need to sit down with them and just say, look, we're happy if you guys want to, go through some sort of training with our inspectors, but, let's get real here. You're not gonna do it in timely manner enough for us.
You kind of summed it up. Our overall comment is, I think, let's get real here. So, and the frustration we've had, I think, is there have been efforts to improve that coordination especially over the last year, increasing even more so since Damon came on board. And then we kind of got hit with this policy that we hadn't seen before. I think we could have worked out a lot of these issues with the public works staff if we had sat down and gone through it together and said, hey, we understand what the county's effort, what their objective here is to protect their assets and their roads. And, we have some experience with that, so let's sit down and work on this together.
That's the funny thing about it. There are very few roads in the county that are county-maintained roads. They're maintained by the county, by contract, but I mean, as far as the county-owned roads, there aren't many. So, I mean, is this language specific to the county-maintained roads, or is it any community service district?
County-owned roads I think is where these.
So we're talking about Vista del Lago, but nowhere else in Rancho.
Well, no, there's the other roads in Rancho. CSA 1 was discussed yesterday in the supervisors meeting as.
Well, what I'm saying, there's a handful of county-maintained roads.
Gotcha.
In Rancho, but the 99% of them are not. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious if they even recognize, there is a distinction,
I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to follow up on it, because it seems to me that they're all over in Rancho.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the conversation, in the presentation I saw, the presumption is that the majority of roads in Rancho would be county-maintained roads. That seemed to be the perception, because there was also conversation that said amongst the supervisors, perhaps we should make this policy available to road associations within HOAs, particularly Poker Flat area. So that seems to me like it's the assumption that this is for all county-maintained roads, and let's provide this opportunity for everybody.
You just spoke, Jeff, about contracts that the county may have to maintain roads. So is there a distinction between county-owned roads and county-maintained roads in here, or would that all be the
that's
same?
kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference, like Rancho has
Right.
a CSD, is that right, Community Service District?
Yeah, yep.
And, they pay their own maintenance fee. La Cantena has its own HOA, and they pay to maintain their own roads. The county-maintained roads, as I understand it, are the main arteries in the county.
Yeah, and if they're not county-owned and maintained roads, then my understanding is this policy wouldn't apply. Really, what this policy does is it changes the permit requirements. So when you pull an encroachment permit from the county to do work in the county, in county roads, these are the technical specifications that the permittees are required to comply with. So if you're not working within a county roadway, county permit probably wouldn't be required. You would have to comply with whatever the local jurisdiction has adopted. But mainly, we really try to stick to our own standards that we've adopted.
And this may really be a moot point. Whatever, we're just trying to go through a policy and agree on a policy and work. We definitely need to work with the county on creating this policy on whatever roads. I mean, if it's 90% of the roads in the county or 20% of the roads in the county, it's still going to affect us and what we do and how, and more so how we do it.
And the main message we've been trying to deliver to the county is that we recognize what they're trying to achieve. We want to work with them on it. We want to help work with public works staff, get to a place where we've got a policy that achieves their objectives, but doesn't put an undue burden on the utilities who are trying to comply with these standards. So that's really the work effort right now. We hope that there'll be, some additional outreach from the Public Works Department. There was discussion yesterday in the board meeting of the possibility of the Public Works Department hosting some sort of a workshop, inviting the utilities to come in and have a dialogue about this policy. I think we would welcome that opportunity. We would absolutely participate in that, and hopefully by the time this evolves into a document that the Board of Supervisors are considering for approval, it's something that we can all live with.
Well, what it says here in 1.3, it says all work within the public right-of-way shall be performed in accordance with the current applicable Calaveras or County of Calaveras and State of California standards conditions. So that seems to me to say anything in the right-of-way.
To Michael, you brought up the point that we plan we look forward to having a workshop with the county regarding the policy. We do have a utility coordination meeting on Tuesday, and we hope to discuss the proposed Dig Once policy with the county at that point in time. And it's my intention to provide the county with our specifications in order to kind of set the table, so to speak, so that they understand what our specifications are for our water and sewer infrastructure, and to allow them to understand that they're strict and they're onerous. And really the impact of concern for the county is the compaction of the open trench and the final pave of the open trench, which we've already given them an opportunity to review prior to final patch pave, and we've already began providing them with proof of 95% compaction, which is their concern. You know, in reviewing multiple Dig Once policy documents and multiple paving requirements for different entities throughout the country, it would be beneficial, I feel, for all utilities within Calaveras County, were the county to recognize the fact that open trenches and infrastructure within the public right-of-way, underground infrastructure within the public right-of-way are a matter of fact, and they're going to occur. And let's work to address those as a group on whole to make sure that the conversation is mutual and the benefits are mutual for all of our ratepayers, because they're essentially the same folks.
I'd be curious, are they providing a map of, you know, just all of the streets or all the roads here in the county that?
Well, so one of the provisions within the proposed document is that we provide them assessments of the roads prior to our work effort. And so one of our asks to the county is, can you provide us with a map assessing all of the roads prior to the work effort? Because as you can see from the 30,000 foot level, that creates a whole host of subjective issues once you have utilities assessing roadways and completing work, and then the county coming in and having to either accept or reject those assessments.
So we, I think where it's at right now, we shared the very detailed comment letter with the county. We made some comments at the Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday, and so we from our perspective, we just look forward to the opportunity to continue to work with them on it, and hope that we.
Can I make a suggestion? In my travels, I've noticed that once a draft report comes out, unless you provide alternate language, you know, it very is, it's unlikely to change. You know, I mean, I heard the Director of Public Works speaking at that meeting after you guys left, and he basically said, well, all we've heard from is CCWD, none of the other utilities have responded. You know, I would rather see you guys go in with a red line copy or something that where their language is, we put underneath it in red line what our policy is, kind of go item by item through here. And again, I think the main concern for me is how responsive they're gonna be. You know, because there's some of this stuff that we don't care as long as they're gonna be there, you know, within 4 hours of us calling. You know, if they're really trying to make it easier for the public, they're having another government agency involved doesn't usually work that way. So, I mean, there's some of this stuff that they can assure us that their inspections are gonna be timely. But then also the permitting process, if we're gonna have to go in, you know, we're gonna have to hire a new guy just to do patch permits.
Right.
You know, I mean, I can't understand why we wouldn't have a blanket permit, and again, even if they wanna have, you know, we'll pay for the training for our inspectors, you know, under their observation or whatever. I mean, there's ways to get around this, but I really think giving them the opportunity to take the text that we agree on will be an easier path than trying to convince them to change it on their own.
I think that's a good suggestion, and I think we'll certainly bring our construction specs to the table when we meet with them, and maybe even just come up with a proposal of our own. We do, just to clarify, we do have blanket encroachment permits, and then for for projects that are, single projects that are larger, we'll get a project-specific permit when we need to.
But I thought this was gonna change that. I thought we were gonna have to have one for each patch.
Well, there was some discussion about the
Yes.
interpretation of the existing standard that was problematic, and so far I don't know that that's actually changed, but one of the county public works department staff had indicated at one point that they were going to interpret, so basically for anything less than 60 linear feet, you don't need a project-specific permit, you can rely on your blanket encroachment permit. But they had mentioned at one point a cumulative total of 60 feet, which we do regularly. You know, if we do
Yeah.
5 repairs in the Jenny Lynn distribution system in one day, we may exceed that 60 feet. And those are emergency repairs. Those are, each of them may only be, 5 or 6 or 10 feet, but cumulatively may trigger that requirement. And then are we in violation of the county's policy for not having gone and got a project-specific permit, which we wouldn't have time to do anyways, that we would, I mean, that type of interpretation of the policy would be unworkable.
How many utilities in the county are affected by this? I mean,
All of them, although there is.
It's also
mean,
gas,
Yeah.
okay.
Phone, gas.
cable,
The
phone.
volcano.
Right, so we have,
So phone, water, sewer,
But,
gas.
but typically those,
Electricity.
the only ones that need to go, we need quick action on, I mean, the phone lines, they're usually in conduit and stuff like that, and they don't fail very often.
Well, let me finish. I was just asking about that. I agree with Director Davidson's observation of where this draft is probably going. And it will be probably be a fast track to doing that. And with the way it sounds like things are going. But the other thing is, if we could get together with other utilities to get some buy-in on our ideas. CCWD is probably a bigger player, and let's have more people that we've roundtabled this with and ran it through. So if we do make those recommendations and get some support from other utilities that at least other water and sewer utilities in the area.
we actually have done that.
Okay.
It was a rectangular table, not round, but it was all the utilities were invited. We
Okay.
had Murphy Sanitary, we had,
Well, I
we
mean,
invited CPUD.
when we make these recommendations, if we can get some support, some written support of the other utilities,
Yeah.
of
We-
our
there
red
were-
lines and additions, changes, that we've ran this by and got the approval of,
And sign it with MSD.
like whoever's the general manager of, like Murphy
Yeah,
Sanitary,
so
whoever runs that joint, if we can
we
get
thought-
their sign in on it.
We thought about doing a joint letter. Our comments were really kind of specific to CCWD's interests. So at the end of the day, I don't feel like what we had would necessarily translate to other utilities, but we shared an earlier draft of our detailed comments with all of those utilities for them to see where we were coming from and what we were, some of the issues that we had flagged. So there is coordination among the utilities, and there were a few others at the Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday as well.
What I think needs to be done is like what Director Davidson said, is let's have CCWD write the red lines, but we could start Tuesday with the group that'll be meeting, and we go together and come up with what we feel the verbiage should be, and that document, everybody can sign on if they want to, MSD, UD, and so forth. And we have to commit to doing a few more meetings, but I think that's what we should have staff do. Direct them to come up with a red line version.
More to come on this for sure.
Yeah, this
Do we
is-
have any deadlines?
We don't, and this is for us today, this is just a discussion item for the board, and there's no deadlines on the county side either. The direction that the Board of Supervisors gave to staff yesterday was to do more outreach with the utilities. We hope one of our requests to the Board of Supervisors was that there's at least one additional round of review and comment on the next draft policy, because we feel like this one needs a lot of work and it needs another round of review and comment rather than them revising this and taking it to the board for approval. And it sounds like at least the general discussion yesterday, in watching the video, it sounds like they were supportive or at least open to that. So we'll wait at this point, kind of balls in Public Works Court to hopefully reach out to coordinate with the utilities, but we'll also continue meeting with the other utilities as well.
I don't think we should wait to see what the county does. I think we should move forward as the CCWD being the lead, and then the working with the utilities group, inviting the Director of Public Works. I think Tuesday, Josh, the other Josh will be there, and the other gal that comes up, and start it with them to say, here's what we'd like to do. You're here in the room, let's go over it, and come up together the proper verbiage and language. And if at some point we can't agree with them, then we note that, and then it goes to the supervisors at some point for their approval. But I don't think we should wait. I think we should, CCWD take the lead and start moving forward and making it a somewhat priority. With everything else you got going on, but I would say have something ready for approval to the Board of Supervisors in 3 months or something. Is that doable?
I like the idea of making those proposals by Tuesday. I mean, I'm already we put a lot of effort into the really detailed comments that we provided to the county already. It's already been a pretty big effort on our end. And so I'm just a little concerned about the staff effort that's gone into it, and actually drafting a policy that we would propose to them at this point. I mean, I think at where we are right now, bringing our construction standards to the next meeting, seeing what their response is to the hearing yesterday, and then if we don't get, if we don't feel like after the meeting on Tuesday that it's going in the right direction, then maybe we dedicate that staff effort to actually drafting a separate proposal. That's a pretty.
I think on the comments in the letter that was written, I think some of them were like more of a question, and I'm not sure if I listened to the live part, and I'm just not sure if the Director of Public Works is, what am I trying to say? Like willing to do the change, because, I know one supervisor said, oh, we've needed this for a long time, this is a real good start. And is it a real good start for a dig once policy? I'm not sure if we all kind of felt that way. We know where they're wanting to go, but perhaps this wasn't the written direction. So, maybe on Tuesday, let's see how they respond in person to you. And I think we should make sure the director is there for Tuesday. And let's see if he responds welcoming to making these changes, then I think letting them do it is good. But let's see how they're going to respond to it. Are they going to respond positively or negatively? And, to the change.
Who are you meeting with Tuesday?
Tuesday is
Just utilities, not the Public Works Director.
Public Works
No,
is
they
invited.
show up.
It's a quarterly utilities coordination meeting that CCWD started up. It used to happen a long time ago. There was a break where it didn't happen for a while, and then I think it was in November when it started again. So this will be the third or fourth one. That's more than quarterly, but
They do have a representative there, but it's not the director.
it's usually Public Works that Josh,
Josh,
the inspector
yeah.
is there, or one of the other Public Works staff are there, but it's most of the utilities. Some other water agencies regularly participate, and then some of the telecom utilities, some of the gas utilities are also in the room. So it's a good meeting, it's a good effort, it's a good forum to hopefully
Right.
have this
And kind
discussion.
of see how they fill it out, if he's, really receptive to going through it again and making the changes, listening to what you all said. And then I think, okay, go ahead and do it. And let's meet in a month and review your second draft.
Right.
But, have it approved by all the entities within reason before it goes back to the board.
Okay, so this meeting you're talking about occurs on a quarterly basis?
Yes.
Okay, so we're all set. Okay, do you have enough direction on
I have one
what
more
you're doing?
question, at least one more. I'm just reading down this on the miscellaneous requirements, and I'm wondering, is this, are the maintenance bond and the insurance requirements, is that per permit?
I don't believe so. For the insurance requirement, I believe it's just to have on file for all permits.
But it needs clarity.
Yeah, it needs everything. I mean, I think you will find, Director Davidson, that the majority of each provision within that proposed policy has a question. There's a question in there that you have.
I think we wrote a 9 or 10 page letter on.
Well, it's just, yeah.
So there's a lot to come.
Well, no, it says in here, it's, at its discretion, a lot of
Yeah,
places.
right.
That was another.
And it's just
That
like,
was
how do
one
you,
of the-
how do we budget for your discretion,
Right.
Right, exactly right.
That was one of the main universal comments we made to the whole document was, there are times when a public agency is drafting policies where you need that kind of flexibility, but for the most part, when you're drafting policy documents, you should keep that to a minimum, and when you do have it up to an individual's discretion, there's criteria to determine how they're determining, what their decision is, and that there's a lot of just open-ended discretion in these conditions that we're not comfortable with.
All right,
Okay,
that's all I have.
so you have direction?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, item 4C, discussion and action regarding the draft preliminary fiscal year 2019-20 operating and capital improvement program budgets. Mr. Jeffrey Meyer.
Good afternoon. Please allow me to get the PowerPoint up and running if somebody needs to get coffee because I noticed these.
I thought this was just going to be a consent agenda item. Sorry, did I use that joke at the finance committee meeting last week? I apologize.
Next year, let's make sure it's not a joke.
Hey, no problem.
To start off this afternoon's discussion, I'd like to point out that I provided you an updated copy of the operating budget summary. And this is, I didn't provide all the extra detail pages in the back, that's part of your budget package, just the summary. The reason for this is we made some changes since the time the agenda package was actually published, and I'll get into that in just a moment. And you also have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. That doesn't want to work. The budget process we've used is similar to those used in prior years. First thing we do is we go out and talk to the departments, find out what they have as far as existing needs and any new unfunded needs. So they go through an exhaustive review of their expenses, and on this particular year, quite a bit of that was done within the utility department because we have a new utility director. And not taking anything away from the interim, when Teresa left, there was a void, and Jesse tried to fill multiple positions. And last year's budget, or this current year's budget, didn't have quite the depth and the insight into creating it. It was sort of, this is what we did last year, we anticipate needing this moving forward. But now that Damon's had a chance to review the district's budget, review the department's needs, and as you looked at today, Dig One and all the different things that are coming into play, he had a great opportunity to provide insight into his budget request and much more in depth than in prior years. So I applaud him for that.
He's proven to be quite needy, huh?
Yes, he is. But you know what? Utility people are like that. We incorporated the 5-year CIP program into this budget. This is something your board adopted. And the thing that's key about this is when you look at the 5-year CIP, what projects are utilities and engineering going to work on? That allows us to figure out how much staff time is going to be spent on those projects so we can cover those staff times or those costs out of those particular, whether it's R&R or CIP budgets, to help offset the operating budget. Engineer works 40 hours on an water R&R project. That time is paid for by that water R&R project. So it helps reduce the salary and benefit costs in the operating fund. We did reduce benefits and increase debt service for the UAL loan, which we talked about at the Finance Committee meeting. We changed the way we account for federal, state, and county fees relating to our FERC licenses. We used to have that as just an offset. There was no dollars budgeted on the revenue side or the expense side. There's a big increase this year for that, $750,000 worth. But this is at the recommendation of our auditors. Right, and it creates transparency. We know how much we're paying and how much we're getting reimbursed. We added the new vehicle lease program, and in the original draft preliminary budget, there were 2 positions we requested, one operator and one purchasing agent. And we're going to be talking about that later. I don't know if you wanted to add anything at this particular point in time for that?
That's a bit of a bigger discussion. I can handle that now if you want. It's kind of an important part of the budget, so we can expand on that discussion at this point. If
I was just going to lead into why we're going to be pulling those out from the request.
So really, what we discussed in the Finance Committee last week was we have a need for additional field staff that we've identified, and Damon and Jesse have taken a very close look at. We actually narrowed it down. It started off with a number much bigger than one new operator. We narrowed it down as much as we could. We're actually in the process of a fairly big reorganization of the operations department in an effort to streamline and be more efficient, to use the existing staff that we have more efficiently. We just had the first meeting on that with the union yesterday, and we'll hopefully be bringing a proposal to the board at the second meeting in June for that restructuring of the operations department. One of the recommendations in that restructuring is the elimination of an electrician. We currently have 5 electricians in the electrical department. We would take that down to 4. That position has been vacant for about 6 months now. We've had a hard time filling it, so it's not a layoff. It's just eliminating a currently vacant position. But it frees up room in the budget so that instead of asking for an additional full-time employee to be added to the district for the purchasing agent, it's more of a one-to-one. We eliminate the electrician, add the purchasing agent, so no increase in the number of full-time employees. And then the hope is through the restructuring of the operations department and the addition of the purchasing agent, which we anticipate taking quite a bit of, we anticipate that freeing up quite a bit of time for especially our supervisors in the field. Those 2 things will reduce the need to hire new operators. So we'll withdraw the request in this budget to add any new operator, any new field staff. And so we'll stay same number of full-time employees as we are right now, with the hope that by restructuring and the workload that the purchasing agent will take off of our field staff currently, that will hopefully reduce or eliminate the need for new operation staff. But we'll monitor that as we go forward.
Just one question on your purchasing agent. Will that employee be going out into each one of the districts? Is that the way it's going to work?
It would be a district-wide purchasing agent that, this really has been identified as a pretty critical need to me repeatedly by several different department heads. And Damon did some homework since our finance committee meeting last week in surveying our field staff and how much time they spend dealing with vendors and purchasing. And so we have some documentation to show exactly the amount of time that our current field staff are spending on dealing with vendors and purchasing. And this gives us the opportunity to standardize our purchases, to negotiate discounts with vendors, get more control over our spending for materials and supplies. So I think over time we'll have to see. It's difficult to quantify, but I could see this person paying for themselves in savings to the district.
I understand all your, reasoning and everything, but my question was, will he or she be going out into the field, or will it all come here?
No, we'll have to work out some of those details.
Specifics.
Initially, at least, it would have to be coordinated with all of our different service areas. Ideally, down the road, at some point, we have, whether it's here or somewhere else, we have a warehouse or a corporate yard where that person can really be, have a warehouse to work from.
Yeah.
We don't have that facility currently. I mean, maybe we could use the garage in San Andreas for some of that as a central location. But we'd really be creating a new position here so we're going to have to wrestle with some of those details.
And the key here is we're taking those positions off this particular budget. They are included in your budget summary showing you the deficit, but I will get to that point and how pulling those positions out will help address our budget shortfall. And when you look at this next slide under new budget expenses, we had those two positions at the top as the costs associated with them. That's why the asterisk was there. But the other items, and this is expenses new from last budget year to this budget year. What's new in the budget? We added $31,000 and change for a VACON loan. We have to replace 2 of our VACONs because of the changes in emission standards, so we want to get a head start on that. It's about $500,000 to $550,000 a piece, and we're looking at getting delivery next spring, and that's why we're looking at 3 months worth of loan payments. The customer assistance program at $60,000, that was not in the 18-19 budget. That's why you see that change. We added $145,000 in utilities for paving and compaction because of the anticipation of county rules and more stringent standards. We added $210,000 for the vehicle lease. However, we also reduced maintenance by $80,000 because that's part of what Enterprise will be doing is part of our maintenance on vehicles. So that was an offset there. We added $80,000 for 4 capacity fee studies, Copper Water and Sewer, Lock and Tennis Sewer, and Jenny Lynn Water for capacity fee studies for next fiscal year. Those are going to be offset by a transfer in from the expansion funds. But we budget for them in the engineering department. We also have increases in legal fees in the GM's budget, $107,500. Majority of that is on our ongoing litigation, and we have 2 MOUs that are going to need to be negotiated in this upcoming fiscal year. We have $40,000 in water resources for Bear Creek extension, permit extension, and this is the biggest jump of all. $753,000, and that's the accounting correction. It's not changing our overall budget because they're offset by revenues coming in from NCPA and MID.
And that's an important one to flag because where you see in the summary, 8 to 9% increases in the expenditures and revenue, a big chunk of that is the $750,000 that is almost all of that is reimbursed. It'll end up being a wash, but that's what accounts for those big changes.
Here's an overview of our revenues. You'll see in the operating revenues up at the top, water sales, sewer sales, and other operating revenues. We're anticipating, and this is from budget, not necessarily from year-end projections. increase of 2.2% or $283,000 in operating revenues. Yet when you go down to look at the non-operating revenues, and this is what Michael was referring to, it's a little over $1 million. The majority of that is this other revenue, which is the reimbursements from NCPA and MID. We have to recognize that as revenue. Property taxes are going up by about 5.4% from budget, and that's based on county information that was provided to us by the assessor's office. Interest in investment income's going up from budget by $113,000. It's pretty much in line with what we anticipate for the end of this fiscal year. We don't anticipate a huge increase in interest rates, but it's higher than what we budgeted last year. And power sales are going to, honestly, will be a little flat, going up 2.6%, and that's based on projections from MID and also taking a look at where the construction cost index is, which NCPA uses for increasing our revenues. So all in all, we're looking at an 8.1% increase in revenues. The big thing to look at here is our operating revenues out of water and sewer. The challenges we've faced is on the consumptive side on water, because we do charge for every drop. Our consumption has not rebounded from the drought era and from when the water restrictions were placed in. We need to get people to use more water. And about 18% of our water revenues come from consumption, 82% from base rates.
Well, God's not helping us much right now either. I mean,
Not at all. We're seeing a drop from last year because nobody's needing to put on their sprinklers. I turned mine on this morning for the first time in a long time.
That doesn't help us either.
yeah, it doesn't.
Unless you have a really long service line.
That's right. The other component of how we balance a budget is called transfers in. This is where we bring money from other funds into the operating fund to pay for expenses that occur in the operating fund where we record them. Debt service, we put all our debt service in the operating fund for transparency. People can see it. We bring funds over from the R&R funds to pay for that debt service. As you can see, the top two lines are for the capital R&R loans. The next line is the Reach 3A. That also comes in from 125, the water fund. That's a USDA loan that we have. We bring in some interest from the 108 account to help pay for the operations headquarters loan. We're going into the second year of payoff for that. We are proposing to bring in some money for one-time expenses, $75,000 from 108 for that one-time litigation costs that we're going to incur, $45,000 for water rights, and that's coming out of the water right reserve, $250,000 from special projects funds for some of the projects that we have that are ongoing. One of them is in this area is $100,000 for 4 trailer-mounted generators, which we know that would be very helpful in times of PG&E shutdown of electricity, any emergencies, any weather-related. We'll be able to move those into areas where we don't have fixed generators. We also are proposing to bring in $150,000 for a computerized maintenance management system, CMMS software. And that's for the first year purchase and get it up and running. Now, the next two lines that you see, transfers in from the R&R funds, those are for projects that our staff are going to be working on, whether it's engineering or utilities. Most of that time is engineering staff work for our engineers, Charles and such, although we do have utilities people working on some specific smaller projects that they're going to be doing the construction side of it. So they're going to be more involved than they have in past years, and that's a good thing. Damon and I work through that process, as well as Charles.
Okay, I have a question on transfer in for water rights expenses.
Yes.
$45,000. Have you determined that that's sufficient?
For that Bear Creek extension, permanent extension, yes. We're doing it very specific just to that one item. And then the two down below are CIP projects, and also that includes from the expansion funds, the $80,000 to cover the capacity fee studies. They're going to come from the 4 different, 20,000 each from the 4 different expansion funds. On the expenditure side, this is where it differs from your packet. And this is where I mentioned I gave you an updated summary sheet. Between the time of I printed out that agenda package to today, we adjusted or changed our on-call costs. And this is, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so this is another change that we're proposing. I anticipate it coming to the board before we go again at the second meeting in June, along with the reorganization. And it's a concern that Damon and I have talked about quite a bit in terms of the district's coverage from on-call, who we have on-call, whether we have adequate on-call response. Currently, the district only has 1 person on call for the entire district, and that doesn't include, treatment plants and alarms that get sent out from the treatment plants and from the collection system from those stations. Those end up going directly to other staff who aren't technically on call. So, just in terms of making sure from a district perspective that we have identified personnel who are obligated to respond to those alarms. We've come up with a proposal to add 2 treatment plant operators, treatment plant on-call positions. So one would be for the, we kind of broke it up into downcountry and upcountry treatment plants. So Copper and Valley Springs and West Point and Arnold would be 2 separate on-call treatment plant operators, and then 1 on-call collection system worker, and in addition to the existing district-wide on-call for the rest of the other distribution system and any other calls that we get. So total of 4 on-call positions, which is up obviously from the 1 that we currently have. But we feel like that's not only necessary from management's perspective to ensure we're covered, but also we think is probably the right thing to do for our operators who are responding to those alarms.
Financial impact of changing it from 1 to 4.
About $72,000
Yes,
a year.
just under 70, just a little over 70,000.
And how is that being received by staff, field staff?
Mixed.
Okay.
And to be fair, we had a meeting with the union yesterday where we hit them with a lot of information. So they're digesting it right now, and we'll get feedback from them over the next week or so. I think there'll be some folks in favor of it because it's additional opportunity to earn additional money. There'll be other people that don't want to be on call even with the additional money, and they'll be required to be. So
it's not a voluntary program, it's a rotation required?
Exactly.
Okay.
So there'll be, I think, a mixed response to that. My expectation is that we used to it. And I think it makes sense from the district perspective to have that because of how big we are and how many different systems we're
Right.
operating. We need the assurance that those calls are going to be.
How big we are geographically spread out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that I think it's necessary for the district, and I think we'll get to a place where our staff are also comfortable with it. And it may be that with both of these, the reorganization and the change in the on-call structure, and like I said, we hit them with a lot of information yesterday. There's some pretty significant changes to how we've done business in the past, and so we'll keep a close eye on it. And 6 months down the road, for some reason it's not working out or it's unfair to certain field staff, we'll make sure we reassess and that we're keeping a close eye on it, taking input from field staff.
So that's 72,000 of the variance of 249,000. Can you explain the rest?
Yes, actually, you're jumping to my next point.
Okay. I'll take
Okay,
it back.
budget point. If you're looking at the year-to-date changes, and again, I'm stepping back, when we put this budget together, we had the operator and the purchasing agent. Those positions are included in that. Also included in that is a new engineer for Charles' department that you approved, but it was not in the 18-19 budget. So that's 3 new positions, plus the on-call that makes up
Gonna be changing.
part of this increase. Also part of the increase under salary and benefits, you have COLAs that are already in place, and you also have step increases for those who get those. Some medical insurance increases, some PERS increases, but on the flip side, we also took out the UAL loan portion of it, and that reduced salaries and benefits by about $22,000.
Okay, but so on this variance, you're saying that the purchasing agent and the operator, you're going to replace a current electrician vacant position and put the purchasing agent in there, so there really shouldn't be any change. Because I thought you said at the finance meeting that all the vacant spots have been budgeted.
Let me step back a second. I did not include any of what the proposals are about swapping out electricians for anything else. What I have included in this budget, since that's not approved yet, what I included in this budget is fully budgeting for the electrician. It's a vacant position. I budgeted for the purchasing agent and the operator because that was what was requested, and I knew that we had already approved the engineer. So if you're looking at the variances, that's what we have. Now, that variance will change once I get down to saying how we're going to balance the budget, because we're going to pull out those 2 positions.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of like you're telling us with it in there, you're saying in the beginning, you said you're gonna, anyhow.
Yeah,
It's like a book, you gotta wait to the end.
Exactly, but see, that's what it's like, just get right to it. What's the bottom line?
That's not the way
And how'd you
Jeff
get
does
to it?
anything.
To be fair to Jeff, the direction from the finance committee last week was to leave those requests in, and to show the board where we started and where
Well,
we're going.
the reason why we said that was because, you know, the purchasing agent was an issue and the operator was an issue. But the way I see it, since you came up with a better solution, I would have done what you guys are saying.
We'll get-
Now,
yeah.
not going the book, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
but,
We're going through it.
yeah. The challenge was trying to mirror what was in your budget packet, what's been out there for public consumption to this process. So that's where we come from. When you're looking at the service and supplies, the biggest part of that was the $750,000 for the fees for the firm. And we do have a little bit of decrease in capital outlay. Part of that's associated with moving to the vehicle lease and not buying vehicles. And debt service did go up $225,000. And I'll get into that in just a moment. Capital outlay, you can see $501,000 here. The key on this particular one is, as I talked to you about, is these are the key dollar amounts when you look down here. We have the PRV vaults and copper sawmill. Those weren't able to be rehabbed this year, so we're pushing it over to next year. That's a $62,000. We have $100,000 for the 4 trailer-mounted generators. We have flow meters, 2 flow meters for $45,000 for the treatment plants, $150,000 for the CMMS software. Those are the main components of capital outlay. And you can see here that we split it up between water and sewer based on their allocation. And you can see the water fund is really taking the bulk of the costs. Almost, I want to say 60% of the dollars budgeted are under the water fund. And we'll come back because that's a key point as we move forward in showing you why we have to budget by fund and how it's affected by fund.
What are the collection storage building and the equipment storage building? Copper Cove and La Cantera, what do those consist of?
Basically just,
Is it repairs or is it actual?
no, these would be new storage buildings to, excuse me, to house new equipment. So in the wintertime, we purchased the Caterpillar mini excavator and the skid steer. So this will be, for Copperopolis, this will be a small building that we'll be able to park that equipment in.
So he's just talking about
Yeah.
RV storage?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, same with collections. Collections keeps a lot of their equipment in the training center, and we would like to put that in their own storage area, which would be near that site as well.
Seems low, but,
Those were based on some quotes that I received, but,
so it's just a regular RV cover is all it is?
yep, based on.
Open-sided, but
Yeah,
covered?
yeah, installed by our construction crew.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
We should talk about that.
I would love to.
No, I'm just, I mean, if our guys are installing them, I mean, you could, those RV covers.
Talk about it later. This
Yeah.
metal building talk later.
Let's make sure we can afford them when we get to the bottom line.
Conversation.
Yeah, because I mean, if our guys are gonna install them, if they can install that, they can install a regular, red iron frame building. And the material cost on something that's not insulated like that for a real building is about what you're talking here.
Right.
It's the install, but you could maybe get a 20 by 30 building for 10 grand, complete with a roll-up door, all four
Where's your gavel?
sides.
Yes.
What's that?
Yeah.
I would love to discuss,
I think that'd be fantastic, because really the concern here was, we have brand new, really expensive equipment that's just exposed to the elements, and so at a minimum, we wanted to cover, but if we could do an actual enclosed door, or an enclosed structure for a similar cost, I think that'd be even better.
Yeah, if we're gonna do the install, but,
absolutely, that'd be great.
give me a call.
Thank you.
I mentioned previous slide that debt service has increased by $225,000. That's includes a retirement of the PERS side fund loan that was paid off this year. That's reduces the budget by $260,000. We're adding $456,000 for the UAL loan and $31,500 for the VACON loan. So all in all, increase of $225,000. One of the things to kind of point out here, our capital R&R loans mature in March of 2021. We're not that far away. And that allows us to have some significant funds available to us once we get to that point.
Will that reduce our debt to loan ratio enough for the grant in West Point?
I actually see that as happening prior to that.
Okay, good.
Just to let you know, once we retire these two loans, it'll free up just under $1.2 million a year in the water capital R&R and just under $400,000 a year in the sewer R&R. So that's good news. And that was based on I know it was aggressive at that time, 7-year term that your board voted on when we took out these loans. Here's a summary by department of the increase in budget or variance to budget from 18-19. I have detail if you want, but I will entertain questions from the board if you're interested about specific departments and why their budgets went up so much. But I do want to point out that somebody is being a budget hoard. If you look down here, his budget went...
It's with a D, right?
With an H.
Just want to make sure you...
Hoard.
Make sure you enunciate.
H-O, yeah, with an H. H-O-A-R-D. See this budget increase of $880,000? That goes to water resources.
Well, he's wearing a tie.
How many, How many people are in that department?
One. And that's even moving Joel out. He's going up that much. We decided to go ahead and put all the dam-related, FERC-related costs into water resources because they are part of that process. So not only did we do the FERC licenses, we also moved the New Hogan costs that we pay to Stockton East for the Corps' costs.
It's getting to be an awfully expensive department.
I mean, cost per employee, it gets really high.
So this is the last year that you're going to be changing.
I wish I could say yes, but I really look forward to next year when I come back and have another one.
Oh, Jeff.
You know, part of it, in this case, I get to blame the auditors.
Okay, and that one I'll take.
Okay, very good. If you would like more detail, I have answers, but at this particular point in time, I'll take your direction.
The only department saving money is the non-department.
That's what I'm responsible for, and the biggest part of that is we took out the $200 and some thousand for the New Hogan fee, the New Hogan costs. And that we reduced by $293,000.
So what's the action that you're requesting? Just direction?
Actually, there's more, but did you want any detail on this particular slide?
When he gets impatient, he's gonna move to the end.
That we can bring back if we have questions. at the next
Certainly.
meeting.
Any detail, any questions, clarity, please forward them to me by email, and I'll provide answers to not only you, but the rest of the
Well,
board
if you could-
members.
I'd like to see the detail on this, but just not here today. Let's do it email, and then if I have
Sure.
questions.
Okay?
I do have one question, and this is looking at the loans and the maturity. So for the next budget, next year, we'll be able to hit it big because we have capital R&R loan.
No, that's going to be one more year. That's,
Well, that's what I said.
yeah,
Oh,
no, you're looking at fiscal year 21, 22,
oh,
where it'll come off.
okay.
But we will be ready to leverage that, the debt ratio that is freed up by those maturing will go right back into infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or other debt, or?
Well, by that, I mean financing new infrastructure projects that we don't have the
I mean,
R&D funds for.
I'd like to get the building paid off as well. You know, that is kind of a, question. I mean, we borrow money from some of these, from some of the, like La Catena Sewer, which we need water in. I mean, are we paying those funds back?
Yes, we are. This was the first year. Those come out of operating funds, not the R&R funds for the building.
No, I know, not R&R. They came from expansion funds, I thought.
It did, but we can't use R&R funds to pay back that loan. What's happening is we are taking money out of the operating budget, which you see here, and paying back the expansion funds. We started that this year.
But it's a good point. So if there's other ways to take that revenue or that, when we take that debt off the books, if we can pay down other debt faster and then leverage even more for
I know we have to
infrastructure.
sit and do the math, because the interest is still staying pretty low,
Yeah.
thankfully, so.
Oh, it's extremely low.
Yeah.
And I don't anticipate it going up for quite some time.
So we won't realize the admin building till 23, 24, right?
Yes. We're paying it off at 6 years. So let's get to the meat of it. This is an updated number. As presented, with the two positions in there, we're $260,000 in the hole. I don't see any additional revenues coming through. Patty and I have looked at it and looked at it. There's just not additional revenues.
Property taxes are flat, or are you
It's
just being
going up.
conservative? Or?
It's going up about 5.4% from budget last year. And we checked again last week. Actually, it was this week. No, last week, I apologize. With the county, they have not changed their projections. And our projections came in April, so they're still focused on, we're using their numbers.
Yeah.
The key that we've started doing recently, last year, is budgeting by the fund, the water fund and the sewer fund, so they have separate budgets. As presented, we actually have a surplus in the sewer fund by about $44,000. Part of that is what I talked about on the capital outlay. It's more, most of the capital outlay budget is paid for by the water fund. Water fund is in the hole $301,000. So what we have looked at is, and this is on slide 12, is what we propose to eliminate the budget gap. And these are the individual items, including, as you see down towards the bottom, the purchasing agent and the operator, which is about $183,000. Part of it is the sewer fund, part of it is water fund. Now, the key here, the unique thing that you see is the very last line, sewer loan, additional principal payment. After making all these changes to the sewer fund and the water fund, with these recommended budget cuts, the sewer fund will have about $160,000 in it, a surplus. We have to balance our budget. We try to maintain small surpluses. We don't look for large surpluses. What my proposal is taking that additional $120,000 and paying down an additional principal payment on the sewer fund loan. That's a loan that we took out the sewer fund owes the water fund close to, at one point it was $750,000, it's a little bit more, because in the past, sewer revenues have not covered sewer expenses. So my proposal is taking any significant surplus and paying down that loan so we can pay it down faster. Now, even with all these proposed changes, and you can see there, the paving and compaction testing has dropped $130,000 based on some of the discussions we've had, ongoing discussions. We're still $18,000 out in the water fund and overall $12,000 out in the overall budget. Now, that doesn't mean we can't get down even further, but this is what we were looking at up until yesterday when we started adding on. We were looking at being pretty much close. Then when we did the on-call, that kind of threw us off a little bit. But as I like to quote a very esteemed director, when you look at a $20 million budget, 11,000 isn't that much. Correct, Director Adaman?
Correct.
It's in our language, it's called budget dust.
Budget dust.
So I'm not worried about.
What percentage of 1% is it?
I think it's less than 1. Yeah. It's like 1% of 1% or 1%.
Okay.
Very small. I'm not worried about getting this budget balanced at this particular point in time. I think we can do it without a problem. And my proposal is to take this, move it forward, create the proposed, or actually bring this adjusted budget without the two positions, with these adjustments, take it to the budget workshop on the 13th as presented, and it'll be balanced at that time. And then we can look at it, go into it a little bit deeper if you wish, or I can go at a higher level. It's going to be the only thing on the agenda for that day.
Wow. What a great day for you, huh?
And then we'll go from there. The other slides include the CIP, but I really don't see a need to go into great detail on that because you've already approved the 5-year CIP update.
I just, one question on your budget reduction, calendar billing inserts,
What customer service did this current year, and they propose, is making an insert one time, mailing out to customers when accounts are billed, when they're due, when lock-off reminder notices come out, and when lock-offs are. As we looked at this budget, and this is kind of the way I look at it, you have needs and wants. We're really down to just needs right now, and that's what we need to be able to focus on. That's kind of a nice thing to have, but I think our customers did away with it for many, our customers didn't have this available to them for many years, and it was a nice thing to do this past year, but we have other options available. We have
have our
Facebook page,
website.
we have online,
Yeah.
all these things to allow us to do so, and instead of creating an extra cost for mailing and printing.
So what this last page reflects is really what we talked about in the meeting, in the Finance Committee meeting last week. You know, prior to that meeting, Jeff and I had met with each of the department heads at least once and gone through their proposed budgets, you know, line by line. And then after the Finance Committee meeting last week, we basically did it again, and just tried to find cuts anywhere we could make them, and if it was a want and not a need. That was the discussion we were having, and especially on that item where we felt like there were some other ways that we could achieve that outreach.
Well, I think you did a good job with these suggestions,
Thank you.
you know. That's good.
What does this do for the board as far as training, conferences, and travel?
It brings you back to this year's budget. I added more because you were looking at a projected year end to be over budget, but it brings you back to this, there's no budget increase if we go with these numbers.
And we did okay.
You're pretty close. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that, honestly, I think there's some discussion that would be,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, you can have that, yes.
Well, at the finance meeting,
Yeah.
I had suggested that perhaps, when they're saying aqua conference, that only X amount of board members get to go, not everybody, and it should go, and here I'm a new one, but I didn't know anyway. But like, maybe give it to somebody first option that hasn't been, instead of sending all 5, maybe only 2, in just a way to lower our expenses.
I thought we had a policy where we don't exceed, directors don't exceed without a certain amount of travel, without requesting from the board. Thought it was like $7,000 travel.
And I think at one point, 10 years ago, we used to have a dollar amount. It's been a little bit more loose these last few years. What you're looking at, let me grab this.
And if we're looking at cutting our budget or making a dent or doing something, that's not the pile of money to pick on.
No, but it's
Correct, but it's
the,
a little start,
no,
little
but
bit
it's the
at
place
it.
that we can take some ownership on,
Correct.
Yes.
you know, for,
Last year, or budgeted for, it's in your packet if you want to dig deep into it. The end of fiscal year 17-18, you were $21,000 in total travel and other travel costs.
Can you tell me what page, you said it was in the.
That would be on page number 5.
Thank you.
This year, and we budgeted 21.5 in 18-19. Looking at my projections, I proposed to bump it up to 28,002.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not
No.
taking any away, I'm keeping it at the prior year level.
And then just as amongst each other, we can just be a little bit more aware, you know, and mindful
yeah,
of how many, you know, trainings we go to or seminars we go to. It's like, you know, we just need to keep an eye on our budget and help lower it the best we can within our reason and have more resources for out there. You know, maybe we need to do more webinars instead of actually physically having some. I mean, I know I really benefited from the aqua that I went to, and I'm not saying we don't need to go to them. I'm just saying maybe we could be a little bit more mindful, you know, about how many of us have to go. And when we do go, we should be having some
Well,
kind of.
I really think that the directors are discretionary anyway, and so we don't go to all of the meetings. You know, I brought back a couple of flyers that we received, and one of them was $849 for 2 days or something like that. I mean, that was And that, that falls in that category, Cindy, that we don't have to do something like that.
Exactly, just be a little bit more mindful so we can save more money
Well-
for there that's needed, when possible. We'll be, okay, let's be extra mindful, because we all are, so maybe our part is to be a little bit more like you had kind of said. Take a little more ownership.
I will challenge anybody to match my travel budget.
Along
Although I
those,
actually have travel reimbursement here today.
yes, and it would be much appreciated if you
Year to
cash
date,
those checks.
I'll take the challenge. I'll take the challenge right now, year to date. Yours versus
What year
mine,
to
your
date are we doing
total,
for next fiscal year?
total expenses well, you've been to Washington DC just recently.
Yeah, it was like $1,300.
Okay.
Either way, if we're asking them to, revise their budget, I think we should all too.
Well, I think we all have been doing that, and that's my,
Yeah, no,
that's my.
I don't see a problem there,
Yeah.
but we did have a problem with it a few years ago, and we
Yeah.
did do that.
We
Yeah.
had, we
Well,
had, we had
we had
directors that
major
were racking up
problems.
20-some
And we
thousand.
we
Well,
just
like
re,
what
we just
Jeff
redid
did.
the whole reimbursement process 3 years ago, and we could revisit it.
Yeah, and I saw that, yeah,
Okay.
that was good. But I'm just saying, instead of
Yeah.
adding money to it for this next fiscal year, let's leave it as is.
Well, that's what he's
Okay.
gonna do.
That's great.
That's what he's
Yeah,
gonna do.
and that was already done
Yeah.
before you brought it up, I think.
I was just saying, thank you for doing that, and why not?
You're welcome. So with your direction, I will take this back, sit down with Michael, the department heads, and do away with the budget dust and come back on the 13th with a balanced budget.
Sounds good.
And so
Can't wait till the
that's,
13th, we can go through all this stuff in more detail.
Well, we'll have Director Thomas here as well.
Yes.
oh, yeah. So this is the discussion and the action, you know what you're doing.
Yes.
Granted.
Very good.
Okay, do we have
Thank
any
you.
more concerns, or are we, Cindy, you're fine?
I'm good.
Okay.
You're gonna send that detail out and we'll look, but I think they did a great job. I wouldn't mind seeing some line item stuff, but it sounds like, they did some details. One of my concerns at the finance meeting was regarding those employees. I kind of wanted to go ahead and approve the budget, but that didn't mean approving the purchasing agent. I'd like to see more detail, which I think you're gonna bring to the meeting in June, so I'm okay for right now.
Very good.
See what-
And Jeff, you're fine, and Scott?
I'm fine.
Okay, good, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
you guys.
Okay, do we want to take a 5-minute break, please?
Good too.
5 minutes?
Did you bring your raffle tickets back?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I remember,
Hand
that's
that
what it
down to
was.
Scott. But Scott, you
Oh, no,
have to
no,
get
3.
tickets.
You owe 3. 3?
I thought,
Well, there's processing fee. Had to go to Starbucks that day or something.
okay, can we,
Hang on.
Either way, I'll donate another dollar.
Oh, you're right.
And just, if I
no,
can't
I
find,
know he was
We're good.
only 2,
We're good.
yeah.
Scott, if I can't find my tickets, I'm gonna ask for a new pack.
Okay, you got it. Thank you. Thank you. I will hit you again.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Resume the meeting with old business. 5A, update on actions of the East Side Groundwater Sustainability Agency and JPA. Mr. Peter Martin?
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I'll make this pretty quick. I provide you with a few hard copies of these slides. These are just slides prepared by the JPA group for purposes of getting outreach out to individual agencies and GSA areas. One of the most important slides is the one that shows where we are in the process right now. Moving along very quickly here, and we are just about to put this out for public review. So next month, some of the chapters should be starting to go out for review by the public and comment. right now, we're in a stage where the individual GSAs have been reviewing certain chapters and providing feedback to the consultant prior to it going out to the public. So there was kind of a first crack by staff to take a look at those chapters. And I've been reviewing some of those along with other staff that are part of our groundwater sustainability agency and packaging that up for the consultant too. So we're in the third grouping of chapters that we've provided feedback on right now. So with regard to water budget planning estimates, this is an important part of determining what the sustainable yield of the entire basin is. And sustainable yield is something that was sort of defined in the water code under Sigma. And it means the maximum quantity of water calculated over a base period, representative of long-term conditions in the basin, including any temporary surplus that can be withdrawn annually from a groundwater supply without causing an undesirable result. That's a lot of words that kind of don't really seem to meet together. But the part at the end is the undesirable results. And Sigma has requirements for the 6 undesirable results, and those are chronic lowering of groundwater levels, reduction of groundwater storage. So the overall storage, basically figure the basin has an overall bank account. Seawater intrusion, don't have a lot of that going on. We're pretty far inland, we're not a coastal area. Degraded water quality, there can be a variety of different water quality issues that are associated with over extraction. Land subsidence, which hasn't been identified except for a very small piece of the basin, and depletion of interconnected surface waters. So that's drawing down the water so far that it no longer becomes connected with the rivers themselves. So essentially, you know, there's a play back and forth with the rivers, and so if you keep continually drawing that water down, sometimes you can actually extract so much that it separates the river and the river, they become isolated. So,
Peter, did you, that definition of what sustainable yield means, just curious, was that created in your work group?
No, that's actually in water code. That was part of the Sigma legislation. Yeah,
That's just fuzzy.
Right.
I mean, there's so many fuzzy words in there. Could mean.
Yeah, it was quite a bit of legal wrangling, I guess. I wasn't here yet when all this went through, but 2013, 14, Aqua and others were just really active, and you get a lot of attorneys in the room come up with some pretty open-ended stuff. The idea was that they wanted to remain as flexible as possible and leave it up to those individual agencies. So,
No offense taken.
yeah. I forget that you're.
Attorneys in the room.
I forget. At one time you were a practicing attorney, and just within the last few years. Yeah. So that's great. So, as far as the actions by the Groundwater Authority Board recently, they approved the low-end estimate of a long-term overdraft. Basically, the consultant gave them a range of areas where they expected the overdraft conditions to be. These are different from the results that were done in prior studies several decades ago. Those were putting it anywhere from 85 to 120,000 acre feet annually in overdraft. So they accepted the 78,000 acre feet per year estimate. So that you know, this is something that has been refined through the modeling process that's been playing out over the last couple of years. And the initial implementation plan will be focused mostly on project and management actions that are using things like in lieu recharge, so using surface water supplies in lieu of groundwater, thereby reducing the total groundwater pumping that happens. These are just the initial cut at those. And then, you know, kind of taking actions like conservation and other ways to reduce overall water demand. And that's basin-wide, and I can get to who's going to be implementing this project in a second here. But using that lower end, they've kind of come up with a suite of actions and projects that will prevent, you know, over planning. So the idea is that you don't want to end up putting a bunch of money or having GSAs go out and strike out on projects that maybe they don't need to do. And so, you know, while that data is ultimately being collected in the 2020 to 2025 timeframe, so that's kind of, they've pushed off a lot of the actions. They don't need to go right into starting to implement projects. And the hope is that they can continue to identify and refine the data over the first phases of the 20-year implementation timeframe. So with regard to the sustainable management criteria, there was a workshop on April 3rd. I think you went to one of those workshops. This wasn't the one you went to, it was in Manteca. It was an all-day workshop. We really hashed out a lot of things. It's probably one of the most grueling days I've had in a while. There was a lot of discussion on those. And yeah, you only went to one, that's right, yes. I've been lucky enough to go to two. And basically what the idea is that you are identifying those thresholds, objectives, and things that are focused on managing those 6 unsustainable or undesirable results. So those topics were presented to the board just in May, actually just a couple weeks ago. And they basically accepted almost all of these criteria that were developed out of that workshop to address these 6 sustainability indicators. So essentially what the board is focused on is they've kind of developed these minimum thresholds and objectives for each of those 6 sustainability indicators. And so where applicable, they don't have to come up with an individual indicator or threshold for every single one of those 6 indicators or 6 sustainability indicators. They actually, the rules for Sigma allow you to use certain indicators by proxy. So say chronic lowering of groundwater wells, for instance, would be a good example. If you can come up with an objective for a monitoring plan that says, okay, we're not going to exceed this amount of dropping wells over the entire basin in this many years over this years, you can use that as a proxy for things like interconnected surface waters, for instance. So some of these indicators are being utilized by proxy for multiple sustainability indicators, if that makes sense. So Sigma requires a series of monitoring, measuring, and model refinements as part of your process, and it has to be in the plan. And so there's a series of those that are listed there.
Monitoring by who?
That's a great question. So you have to figure that out. And so the plan has to have something in place that says that you will come up with some sort of a program. It could be done as much as a very small, like GSA level, or you could put it all in together and try to do one monitoring program that covers the entire basin. You can set individual monitoring objectives for certain areas as well. So what they've kind of agreed to is that they wanted, the board itself, the JPA board, wanted to vote, they voted that model verification and refinement activities would be completed at the entire basin scale. So it's interesting that they chose to do that because there's no financing plan that's going to be required as part of this plan.
And who's the agency that's going to do it? The GSA? Or?
Yeah, so right now it's going to probably be the JPA or the collection of GSAs. Right now they punted that question of how it's going to be financed and who's going to do it. They just come up with a plan. And
I assume when they talk about monitoring, they're going to monitor private wells.
So actually, they've come up with a selected network of wells that they're going to monitor. Some of those are CASGEM wells that we have currently in our program, and then there's a series of 11 wells that they proposed, and they would be focused just for. But you need landowner participation too, as well. People don't want you just going and putting wells on their property and digging around as well. So right now, they've identified funding from the state that's going to fund they did 3 additional wells. One of those is in the southern portion of the east side groundwater sustainability agency down in Stanislaus County, in that triangle. But they've had trouble, again, finding a willing landowner that wants to site a monitoring well on their property. So.
That's not surprising.
So right now, that board has agreed to do it at a basin-wide scale rather than just individual GSAs, because they think that the cost savings can be made by trying to group all this in a series of selected wells. So those are going to be in the plan. They're going to identify those particular monitoring wells, and DWR can say yes or no as to whether or not they find that monitoring plan acceptable. So. As far as project implementation, the JPA board did not feel comfortable with trying to come up with a financing plan that would finance actual physical implementation projects at a basin-wide scale, so they chose to say that each GSA can go forward with projects if they agree to. So they came up with a list of projects. The hope is that many of those would be grant funded over time, that, they get in the plan and they're eligible for doing so. And so this allows for those GSAs to individually lead those projects in their areas. And then also there was concerns about having responsibility at a basin-wide scale. Didn't want GSAs being responsible for implementing other projects that maybe other agencies are taking the lead on, right? Especially the risk associated with if they fail and things like that, so. It did allow that they can work and have the JPA take the lead. In certain instances, you have a lot of small entities like Lockford, CSD, and others who may not actually have the ability to leverage. So there's an option to allow for the JPA itself to take up a project as well. So just a quick update. I mentioned the wells that were going to be developed as part of a grant proposal. There's this technical support services funding that came out of Proposition 1. The Joint Powers Authority went after that funding, and at this point, the application for that grant has been approved and is going on to the next level. So the way DWR works is they kind of do like a pre-application for some of this stuff, and then you go forward with your actual project grant proposal in more detail later on. So that's all I got, but I'm happy to answer any questions. There'll be more to come, and ideally, the board will be ready to move and approve this groundwater sustainability plan come September, October timeframe. So,
I just had one question. The makeup of the board, has it remained pretty constant since you've been involved?
we did have 2 groundwater sustainability agencies drop out. The city of Lathrop was put in an application to, this is interesting, cut themselves out of the basin. So they actually redrew the boundaries, and they became part of the Tracy subbasin.
The boundaries of their city?
The boundaries of the eastern San Joaquin groundwater.
The city of
subbasin.
Lathrop redrew the boundaries of the...
They appealed to the Department of Water Resources to redraw the Bulletin 118 boundary for the basin.
And we were successful.
Yeah.
And then you said another one?
We should have tried that.
And then Woodbridge just said they had no interest in participating anymore. And this was interesting. They just basically said they assumed the county, San Joaquin County, is just going to take over. And there's no guarantee that they have. So basically, the county has to affirmatively agree that that can happen. There was quite a bit of controversy, but it's not in our county, so.
Wow.
But they just bowed out about 2 or 3 months ago.
So it's pretty much stayed the same.
Yeah, for the most part, the other agencies are all in. They think it's a good idea to go in on this plan together. It's a very expensive plan, so it's nice to have some cost sharing there. So
But it's very interesting how this thing has taken a life, from theoretically out there, this is what we're going to do, and then, and here we are in the middle of it, hitting our deadlines, and it's, creating all these agencies and bureaucratic involvement with so many people that, and thank you for keeping us all abreast. As it goes
yeah,
forward.
and if it's any consolation, I think that the approach that's being developed right now, one where we don't rush to go implement a bunch of projects and spend millions of dollars trying to deal with groundwater recharge and things like that, where we know that there's huge data gaps in the basin. So if we spend the first 5 years of the planning period just collecting data and improving the monitoring networks and things like that, I think that pays dividends, because people, you can do recycled water projects, you're going to curtail people's pumping, you're going to do things like that.
Well, what I'm hoping is that eventually that they're gonna actually finance, some infrastructure to get some of these orchards off of groundwater. I mean, anything within a certain proximity to, the Calaveras River, we should be hoping we can find some. I mean, the only impediment is the pipe. You know, it's not
Right.
water supply,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, only impediment, yeah, no, that's,
And I think,
$1 million impediment.
and I think, this is where maybe that discussion on reoperation of Hogan may come in handy if the Corps is willing to engage in this with us again, that, and Stockton East wants to be a willing partner, because there may be some opportunities there to try to capture more storm flows. The recharge wouldn't necessarily happen in Calaveras County, because the infrastructure might be down in the valley, and probably a better opportunity there with regards to the way the soils work and stuff, but
Well, the same is true of the other side, you
Yeah.
know, on the Stanislaus. I mean, there's, if we get the storage in Maloney's, we'll have something to,
yeah, I
do. I mean,
think that goes hand in hand, is looking at the surface water supply, and maybe whether or not we're using it the best
I just wonder if one of the reasons they're planting so many trees down there is they're expecting a moratorium on that. I mean, that's a real
Yeah.
private property rights thing, but it's clearly, as far as the water supplies goes, and I'm not saying I agree with the private property aspect of it, but, we can't keep, sucking water out of the ground for all these trees unless we're doing it with surface water. I mean, at some point, they're gonna, and nobody wants to do it because it's gonna be so hard, and the ag lobby is so strong, but, I mean, that's,
Yeah, Stanislaus County put in a very prohibitive ordinance on new wells,
Did
and it was partially motivated by the fact that there was this uncertainty with all these plans going in place. They got sued, so it's in the courts right now. So it's like, I think.
yeah, because that groundwater is not adjudicated, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
unless they do that, they can't claim that water that's underneath somebody's property, but.
So there's at least 3 different court cases going on right now, and everyone's looking, Stanislaus County and others, and seeing how that plays out as to how you can go about crafting some of these ordinances and what authorities a lot of these counties have. So stay tuned on that. So, I mean, Walt Ward, who I work with over at Stanislaus County and the GSA, is very knowledgeable about these things, but yeah, he's right in the thick of it right now, and it's could go all the way up to the state Supreme Court, probably, so. I did want to mention too, I forgot, we're trying to set up a meeting, just to what's going on locally with the other groundwater sustainability agencies, including Calaveras County, Rock Creek, and Stanislaus County, and figure out a way to create a governance structure within the memorandum of understanding that exists right now for the East Side GSA. So we're going to have that talk possibly in July and kick off those talks, because right now the way the MOU was crafted was really just to get us to the point where we could file as a groundwater sustainability agency. There's not a lot of meat to it as far as governance, so we'll possibly be bringing that back to you probably after the groundwater sustainability plan is adopted.
I would take a look at the original UMRA formation and those, if you can get a hold of those documents, because there was a lot of thought brought in about, because eventually they're going to want money, so we're going to have to vote independently, or are we going to vote together, or what's going to be the makeup of our vote, because the county, may not be in agreement with us on this thing, but we got to go down there and vote as a group, is that, or we don't know yet, depends on how we.
That's the issue, yeah, is we need to figure out a voting structure and financial decisions, who makes those decisions, because you don't always necessarily want one individual that sits on a JPA made up of just 4, and how do you, when you have 4 voting members, how does that vote shared and things like that, and who's
Yeah.
contributing, so these are things that really need to be carefully crafted so that we understand.
Well, we put a lot of work back in the day on the formation of that, and who had because the financial aspect was the district, but the county got a advisory seat on the UMRA board at that time. And so the counties were advisory, and because the water districts are the ones that had the skin in the game at the time. It's evolved into something different, but there's a lot of thought back in the day of how to form that, so it would be.
I have a lot of that info. Larry never threw anything away, so. I could
Maybe
take a
just to
look.
scan it, the voting block is, You know, East Bay ended up having to be the big financial block, but they had an equal vote on what we would approve, but they had a higher stake in it. So there's, you know, there may be some differential there on the voting authority, and, you know, because I can just see that becoming a mess, you know.
Because as far as the money was concerned, when we first went into it, you know, the percentage, I think, was based on what percentage of,
Well, the county at the time couldn't be a part of it because it was our purpose was to acquire a hydroelectric facility. I don't think that, if I remember right, I don't think they have the ability to do that. So they couldn't be a voting paying member at the time, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and you know, things like we talked about, like the monitoring costs, I think that's a given. I think we know that these GSAs are gonna have to contribute something. And so it'd be better if we could figure that out amongst ourselves.
Well, in
first
this
before we-
case, the county has the only authority over groundwater, and we don't.
Right.
Except for what we own. And so they are the authority
Right.
over the groundwater. You know, I mean, where we come in is, you know, at the end of this, if they start funding projects that use surface water,
Correct.
you know.
Have you seen any change in the county's involvement since our meetings with them a few months ago?
No.
Are they not involved in these?
At a distance.
Supervisor Mills participates quite a bit, but it's the staff that I've been trying to
wasn't
bring.
Brian?
Brian does
Yeah.
what he can, but,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, he's got other departments that he oversees. They really need, that was our discussion with them, was that they need to have staff dedicated to reviewing and potentially putting in place ordinances and policies that are responsive to whatever comes out of this plan.
And we had talked about Supervisor Mills replacing President Thomas on the JPA board, and I don't think that's happened yet either.
No, the Board of
Oh, they haven't.
Supervisors,
That hasn't made it to
Haven't-
their agenda? Wow.
so I think, you know, hopefully if we have these talks in July, that, again, we reiterate that they need to
Yeah,
be
we can
an equal
revisit
partner. Yeah.
Does it have to be an elected, or should it be a staff member?
On the Joint Powers Authority Board, they've stated a strong preference for an elected, the one that President Thomas sits on right now. But on the advisory committee, which I sit on, they like staff, because they want those staff to be driving those initial discussions and the recommendations to that board. So I've been doing that. Right now, Walt has been filling in as an alternate on both over at Stanislaus County. So when President Thomas isn't available, he has been sitting on the
Well,
JPA board.
You may need to talk to the new CAO and make them understand that you know, a board member can't authorize by his own vote any expenditure by anybody. You know, it has to, any decision on any money going to a JPA has to be approved by the board ahead of time, or declined, whatever.
Yeah, our individual, with the way the MOU is written right now, any financial decisions reside with the individual boards of those. So, yeah, again, these are things that need to be teased out immediately.
Yeah, it
'cause
sounds
right-
like it's moving forward fairly quickly right now,
Yeah.
so. All right.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, thank you. All right, item 6, reports. 6A, general manager.
Okay, so most of the heavy lifting that we've done over the last few weeks, we've talked about already in the agenda items. A few items that I'll touch on in my report, but a big chunk of our work over the last few weeks has been budget, and then the reorganization and the on-call discussion. That was quite a bit of time for Damon and Stacy and myself. And I think we're pretty pleased at the direction that all of that is going in, but like I said, we're still waiting for feedback from the union, and but I look forward to bringing a final recommendation to the board. We are, Damon's also doing a lot of work on the power safety, poke safety power shutoff issue, and our response to that, our preparation for that, and coordinating with other fire, the local agencies. We were at Calaveras Consolidated this morning. We're on the agenda for the next, there's meeting of all the different fire districts in the county that we'll be presenting at next month. So just trying to work with the fire agencies, with PG&E, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be ready for those power shutoffs, and for, for wildfire events. Just an update on the last meeting, was it the last meeting? I think it was, when the board approved the change in the customer service manager position.
Right.
And
Yeah, I was wondering how that.
yeah, so I just wanted to touch base on that real quick. So far, I think it's going really well. I really applaud both Stacy and Joel for their enthusiasm in taking that on and the way that they're handling it. And I've met with the customer service representatives also. And I think there'll be some issues to iron out over as we go down this road, but so far I think it's working out really well. And I can tell you from my perspective, especially with how much Damon and I are really asking a lot of Stacy with some of the changes that we're proposing, and it's been really great to have her dedicated to those HR
Yeah.
issues 100%.
She can listen to you now without.
Yeah.
So with that said, HR is looking better and smoother. How's customer service looking?
I think there's a kind of a transition there of Joel retraining in some ways. Some stuff has changed over the last few years since he's been there. So he's been spending a lot of, one-on-one time with the customer service representatives to kind of get back up to speed. Stacy's been really integral in that effort as well, in making sure Joel's fully up to speed. But like I said, I've met with the customer service representatives, and there'll be some things that we're going to work on, and I'll keep checking in with them on that. But so far, going well on that side as well.
Okay.
Did you get Stacy closer to you?
Yeah, she's in her office all the time now. It's great. The West Point grant came up earlier today, and I wanted just to give the update that we actually did finally get a favorable response from the water board on that audit. So it looks like we will qualify, and so we're gonna. It'll take some time, but we're gonna continue to pursue that grant funding. And then on the Section 219 front, this is the $3 million authorization from 10 years ago that we've been pursuing with the Army Corps of Engineers. And we came across an issue when we were in DC of at the time the legislative proposal to reauthorize those funds was, I think it was for $75 million, but they were also considering a provision that would prevent new starts, which is what we would be, a new project. Mia worked really hard to propose changes to that language and that legislation. And we just found out this week that the new legislation, not only does it not prevent new starts, but it's also a $100 million pot that we will have the opportunity to compete for. It doesn't mean we're gonna get it, but it means at least we have that ability to compete for that money. So we have a call set up with the Corps because we've already submitted our notice of intent to pursue a project to utilize those funds, and we have a follow-up call with the Corps set up to move that process forward. And then lastly, I think just a quick update on the salary survey. We had a very productive meeting with the consultant and union leadership and management where we went through some of the questions that have been raised, some of the challenges that the union has brought to the draft results that the consultant circulated, worked through a lot of those issues, and got everybody in the room together and worked through a lot of those issues. We hope to have a final report. I don't have an exact date, but I hope to have a final report in June and be done with that, so we can then take that as a point of information moving forward.
Have we seen that draft? Reason why we haven't, or can we?
Have we seen what?
The draft
I don't know.
salary.
Honestly, I'm not sure if that was ever circulated to the board or not.
I don't think so.
We saw it
We've
during
seen
the recruiting process.
preliminary.
Yeah, but I think that was just like one page. Isn't it several pages
couple
in this
pages,
report?
It is, yeah,
We
and
saw
it's,
that in the food, but I don't remember seeing one.
it is in the.
Stacy
it's-
had it, we saw as much of it as
Right.
we needed to.
For the purpose
For that
of the day,
purpose,
but
yeah.
I'd
It's a-
still like
it's a-
to see the rest of it.
Well, I don't think it's done yet, is it?
It's definitely still, there's still some significant changes that are being made to it, and some of the changes actually, and I wasn't part of the discussion when the draft first came out, I wasn't here yet. But maybe the concern was, some of the changes that are being made are really critical to making it an
Give me an
accurate
example
document.
of what kind of a change would be.
I think this is all kind of closed session, contract negotiation item. I don't think it's
Yeah,
a.
so I just wanted to give an update on the status of when that report would be complete. And we can, once we're there, we'll have a more detailed report. That was it. Thank you.
Okay, board reports. To my right,
Me down here? There was no IRWM meeting for May. And so nothing to report on that, other than I am going to be on vacation June 17th through the 25th. I will be at the meeting on the 26th and the other meetings. And I want to thank you, Michael, for having Joel reach out to me about that CAP program, and that's been resolved, so one of the ratepayers are applying. It was, my question was, why do we have to have the property owner sign off on a tenant applying? And the resolution is, as long as they have a rental agreement or lease agreement, we don't need to get approval for the homeowner,
Oh,
so
that's good.
very pleased, yeah, thank you for that.
okay,
Just, I wasn't at the last meeting, but I did want to report at the Aqua conference. I sat in on one meeting regarding, cannabis cultivation and what the new regulations are going to entail. And I think it's going to be pretty important that we meet with county officials and start to talk about this, because they're talking about not allowing people to, if they're pulling water out of the stream now, not allowing any riparian use of that water from April through October, proving you have a water right to irrigate with it. There's a lot of very restrictive rules that we may end up having to do a lot of research, and when the county is approving these licenses, I think that they're gonna have to come through us for a review of where their water source is gonna come from, as I understood the state regulations, as they're being adopted. So I just think it's something that we need to be aware of, and certainly the county probably needs to be, we need to be working with the county, if they're gonna go forward with cannabis cultivation again, the state is gonna have some pretty strict water rights requirements that we may have to be involved in. So I just think it's something we need to be aware of. And then the only other thing I meant to mention it when you're talking about the fire notice, it's at some point in your discussions with these fire departments, I think the county needs to be sending, or PG&E needs to be sending out notifications that people that are on wells will not have water supply during these shutoffs. There really, believe it or not, is a huge disconnect on people that they don't always recognize that they're even on a well or as such. And I just want to make sure that people understand what's going to happen when that power gets shut off. They're not going to be able to fight a fire at their own place unless they have a portable tank and generator, or portable tank and pump, or generator.
Several items have come up over the course of this meeting. I'm coming up, I think, with an agenda for our first meeting with the new CAO for, I think we'll have several of these items. We can just check in and get them up to speed on from the water district.
That's it.
will you be okay, it's Scott's turn, sorry.
To kind of piggyback on Director Davidson's comments on the power shutoff, that we've heard, I went to a couple sessions involving that at the Aqua Conference also, and we definitely heard that they will be, our power will be suspended over this next summer, and in our area, which is a key fire area that hasn't been, or most of the county hasn't burned yet. it definitely will be affecting, there will be businesses shut down for probably 2 or 3 days at a time. It's not only going to affect the homeowners, it'll affect an entire,
Week at a time.
yeah, it'll affect an entire town.
Takes them so long to get it back.
I just bought a generator this week, just after getting home from the ACA conference and hearing how serious it is. And we see these full-page ads in the paper.
Right.
From PG&E telling us about, I don't know if everyone's noticing them, there's a flyer in my PG&E bill telling us, and I talk to people, no one knows about it. I mean, it's in the paper, you get bulletins, anyway, it is gonna happen. Just a couple things going on this month. Camera's got a meeting on June 19th here in this building at 2:30. CPUD, our local for San Andreas, Mountain Ranch Paloma, or San Andreas, Moke Hill Paloma Water District is having a rate hike hearings. We've already had two hearings last week in San Andreas and Moke Hill. Their meeting is going to be at the town hall on June 11th, 7 p.m. to further discuss and most likely implement or vote on this increase. This is the same increase as they didn't do last year when they had the exact same process. And so it's looking like they had a study group made of 2 directors and that studied the issue over this past year, and I think they're coming to the conclusion that they do need to do it, and are going to be voting on it on Tuesday, June 11th at the town hall. Later on this month, Mountain Counties is having a tour, a two-day program in Auburn on June 27th and June 28th. That's a Thursday and a Friday. Following our meeting on the 26th, it's a two-day tour, for all day meeting on basically on Thursday, and then is a reception on Wednesday evening on the 26th. And just to kind of save the date, Mountain Counties, I'm on the board at Mountain Counties and as a board member, and I'm getting together with Barbara Balin. She's the president of Tuolumne Utility District. She's our current president of Mountain Counties. We're putting together a program later on. It's kind of a save the date on November 14th, 15th. It'll be up in a tour in the Murphys Avery area of the Stanislaus Water Projects, and then a reception at Murphy's Hotel.
What was the date again?
The 14th and 15th, it's a Thursday and a Friday of November. So just kind of a save the date. It's the reception, we're trying to get a high-profile speaker and inviting 3 or 4 counties representatives, definitely all of our local water, wastewater, politicians from throughout this county, Tuolumne, Amador, and even into El Dorado. There'll be quite a few people hopefully invited to the reception and hopefully able to make it. And we're gonna have a tour earlier that day, and then our regular Mountain Counties meeting will be on Friday morning at the hotel, just for the board. Anyway, that's all I got.
Okay, you can invite Dave Egerton.
He'll be on the list.
Oh, okay.
You're invited also.
Oh,
more
thank you.
importantly.
Thank you. Because Mountain Counties is the one I don't ever get any notification about any meetings or.
We'll ask Mr. Kingsbury to add you to his email distribution list.
Yeah, that's a simple,
Yeah.
you email him and I'm sure you'll be inundated with more emails than you need. And
Yeah,
I know
watch
Rebecca
what you ask for.
forwarded some stuff out just yesterday to you.
Oh, well, maybe I haven't looked at my email, so that was one. Okay, and that's interesting because you were talking about that 2-day conference and I said, Scott, you're going to be in attendance at that one up
I
in
will,
Auburn?
and they also have a symposium on November 8th, if you want to, another item that's going on in Auburn as well for Mountain Counties.
Oh, okay.
You don't need email, you got me right next to you.
Okay. This goes to what Cindy is talking about the expense that we directors are looking at, because we got this thing for the California Water Law and Policy, and what was the price of this? $895 per person. I couldn't believe that. But anyway, that's the stuff we won't be going to, Cindy.
Well, I don't want to say don't go to it.
Okay.
Make sure there's Well, no.
Value.
Okay, did we respond to this letter that came from the United States Department of Agriculture concerning the Black Springs campground? Do you remember that? I don't know. That,
First I've heard of it.
okay.
Looks like you got the original letter right there.
Well, could be
Why was it
CC.
addressed to you?
Okay, and I did attend the Snowshoe Springs Association Board of Directors meeting, and I have an agenda and minutes from their past meeting. And Snowshoe Springs did very well. They got a $1,700,000 loan from USDA at 3 3/8%. So that's great for them. Anyway, they're a very active group, and so I was happy to go there. Okay, that's all I have. So our next board meeting is Wednesday, June the 12th at 1 o'clock, the regular board meeting. And then the following day, we have the budget workshop. That's June the 13th at 1 o'clock. And then the next meeting would be June the 26th at 1 o'clock, a regular board meeting. And if there's nothing else, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Good job.
Was I professional enough?
Did you get my message yesterday?